This is Reidsville Chamber of Commerce News and Views, a business resource show with a focus on enhancing the business environment through advocacy, mentoring, and education in an effort to promote economic growth. The Reidsville Chamber of Commerce is a membership organization in North Carolina, working on behalf of its members for the betterment of the community. With Chamber of Commerce News and Views you can use, here's Chamber President Diane Sawyer.
Hello, welcome to the Reidsville Chamber of Commerce News and Views show. I'm Diane Sawyer with the Reidsville Chamber of Commerce, and we are really excited today to have a very special guest with us, Dr. Jennifer Kimbrough, who's been working with one of our members from Compassion Healthcare, and she is a public health consultant. And as you all know, if you've heard me talk about, that is one of my favorite subjects to discuss, as it is my former life and background as well. So we're going to be discussing today about what she is doing and her role in our project that we are working with her on, and also how it's affecting our business community at this point in time, and kind of what the projections are and how we can work together to continue to do our very best. So Jen, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Diane. It's great to see you live and in person, and good to see everyone out there that I can't actually see in, virtual world. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Very excited to have you. So Jen, let's just start by, we were working with some different folks, and Dawn Tarabo, the Reidsville Area Foundation. We were working with Billy with Compassion Healthcare, and this kind of, Billy is a go get it done kind of guy, and he was just like, hey, we have the CARES Act and we want to get this done, and it sounds like a great project. Find me somebody. And Dawn said, I know the perfect person, and in pretty much no time we were up and running with this project that you were doing. So tell us a little bit about your work and kind of how this got started and what the goals are.
Sure, of course. So Dawn and I go way back in terms of public health work together for probably 15 years or so. So that's how she and I got connected. My previous work, I've worked in the field of public health for, almost 30 years now. And for the last 15 or 20 of those years, I've worked in higher ed, both at UNCG and at Elon. And at Elon, I was teaching epidemiology and research methods and things like that, and had the great fortune of teaching epidemiology during a pandemic. So that was actually really fun and interesting. And I spent a lot of time really digging into the data around it during the spring as things were evolving and coming to, current fruition. And just trying to really understand the pandemic and, gaining additional expertise myself on COVID-19, and just trying to really learn and understand what was going on and what to expect. And at the same time, Dawn had been talking with Billy, and the project sort of evolved into what it is. So how that all got started was there was an obvious need to do something as we became aware of how severe this pandemic was going to be. And I know sort of in the early stages for people, it felt like that's something really weird that's happening in New York or across the globe somewhere else. It's not really happening here in our hometown. But knowing what we know about pandemics, we knew it was coming here eventually. And wanted to kind of get ahead of it and think about what can we do to really support our local community and support businesses in particular who are going to have to deal with the impacts of the pandemic, and as we could, as well as continue operating to the best we could. So we wanted to understand what their challenges were, what their frustrations were, what kind of support they might need to be able to continue operating. And that got started around early July. We spent some time doing key informant interviews with a number of folks, including you, Diane, and then did a survey of small business owners, well, all kinds of businesses, but primarily small business owners around Rockingham and Castle counties to understand their particular needs and how we might be able to help them. And what we learned from that was there's a wide variety of needs depending on the size of the business and health and safety people or whatever. And that kind of evolved into what we thought was going to be a series of maybe webinars or how to, like, fact sheets or whatever, turned into more of like a, well, how can I help you individually? So the work that I'm doing right now is sort of individual consulting with whatever businesses or organizations need help understanding how to make their practice, on a day-to-day basis safer. So that's kind of where we are. I know that was kind of a long, rambly story, but that's where we are. It's kind of like, I'm here to help and understand your particular situation and figure out how you can best be safe.
So let's break that down for a minute, because I'm totally okay with putting the chamber and visitor center out there. Excuse me. And I think that Dawn would be okay with me saying too, I mean, as we've been a part of this project together, she and I have very similar buildings in that we have tenants, and we have public space, and that we have our own offices within these larger buildings, and we're just a couple doors down from each other. And we were having that same conversation as the president and executive directors of our, our nonprofit organizations. What did that look like for us? And she had mentioned, well, I'm talking it through with Jim, but these are some things that we're thinking about. And it kind of got me thinking. And so then you and I had this whole conversation, and I'm okay with us talking about those, just maybe to get other people talking. One of the things that we discussed were the very simple procedures for entering the building, right? So like you had some, different things to say about that. And we talked about temperature checks, and we talked about a log. And one of the things that I got from my conversation with Dawn was a log. And it was really important to me to be able to know who was in the building each and every day, so that if there was an exposure or there was a situation, we could go back and pull the log and say, well, this is who was in the building the day before, here was in the building the day of, here was in the building day after, whatever it is that we needed to look at. And that was really key for me, because I had been by myself for so long and not in the building, and most people weren't in the building, that it was hard for me as we started coming back and realized that we were just going to have to deal with it the best that we could. But people were going to have to come back to work, and we were going to have to try to figure out how can we keep the number of people in the building low, but also keep them protected. So let's see, what else did we talk about in ways to protect us and things that other people that might benefit them?
We talked about mask wearing, and we talked about ventilation and sort of the aerosolized aspect of how this disease is apparently transmitted. So I think that's one of the things that maybe is a little bit more challenging to understand, is kind of how one person can acquire the disease. And but to the best we know right now, it's spread through little droplets that come out when you speak or talk or sing or yell or whatever else you might do. And those kind of hang in the air. And the thing that makes it kind of challenging is they're tiny, tiny droplets, and they might sit in the air for 15 or 30 minutes because they're so small, they're light and kind of almost weightless. And so they hang in the air. And sort of the greater the concentration of those droplets that might have virus in them, the more likely someone would be to inhale those droplets inadvertently and acquire some of that virus if it was in the air. So having things like windows and doors open and allowing fresh air to come in and sort of dilute whatever virus is in the air is going to help reduce transmission if you happen to get someone infected in your building. So I think those are some of the other things that we talked about. It's like, if, despite all the precautions that you're taking, someone came in who was infected, probably didn't know they were infected, were in that sort of either pre-symptomatic or maybe even asymptomatic, as a they never even got symptoms, they just were sick and didn't know it. How can you reduce risk, right? So better ventilation, obviously less contact, obviously wearing a mask to the extent that that's possible to prevent, both the outflow and the inflow of any viral particles that are in the air are all going to help reduce the likelihood that someone gets sick.
And I think, too, we've had a lot, the chamber, when I say we've had a lot of conversations. Reidsville has been really strong from the beginning. Our mayor is very involved and very progressive, and he does these now bi-weekly COVID updates. And I think I told you, he's part of the Johns Hopkins calls, and he wants people to understand that, yes, we can move forward, but we can practice the 3 Ws, and we can do things safely and still support our local businesses. And I think the words that you said, reducing the risk, as an employer, that is what is so important. And then as a business owner, so thinking about your employees, thinking about your customers, and just trying to make sure that you're doing the best that you can do. And I think that it's difficult for people sometimes. I mean, EPI was one of my favorite classes, probably my most favorite. And disease process always kind of intrigued me. And so, but I, even with that background, could not bring myself out of my situation to think about what I needed to be doing to protect everybody and do it the right way. And so this is why we're offering this service, right? Like, you are a free consultant to any chamber member. Compassion Healthcare is a new name of the umbrella, but it covers the Caswell Family Medical Center and the James Austin Health Center. And by default, the way federally qualified health centers work, they cover a region. And with those two being under that umbrella, the region includes Reidsville. So if you're a member of the Eden, Western, Caswell, or Reidsville Chamber of Commerce, you are included in this project and can be and use your services for free to talk out. If you're an industry, if you're a retail business, if you're something like a nonprofit, or you're, in subleasing space. And so I think that we want to ensure that people are taking advantage of this service that we have. And that's why I wanted to bring you on today, so that people could hear us talk through things that they might not have thought about. And ventilation's a big deal. A lot of people don't understand that, there's been a lot of things said, but that was, when the health department and I started discussing our restaurants and started discussing our other businesses and how to help them, it was one thing that, one of the food inspectors said to me. She was like, I don't think people understand, like, one of the ways was somebody was sitting in front of an air conditioner in a small restaurant in China, and that's, it was blowing across all these people, and that's how people were getting infected, and people didn't understand it then, and now they do. And so this is why, like, we talked about public space at the chamber, meeting space. These board meetings, a lot of people are talking about board meetings being virtual and wanting to be back in person. And I think the local, councils have struggled with it. But at the end of the day, especially if it's one that you typically eat, that becomes an event, right? Because you take your mask off. And we had that conversation. You and I were talking about people eating at meetings versus getting together with their mask on and being 6 feet apart and trying not to. That's a big deal. And I think that's what people don't understand about this concept. We're in the midst of the holidays. And there are all these continued, what would be called a super spreader events being planned by people, both business and personal, that aren't following the mandates. And they're there because we want people to be safe and to understand, like you said. I mean, the whole thing about, everybody's in uproar about Thanksgiving, but at the end of the day, the Thanksgiving dinner, the whole deal is, if you're eating with people you don't normally eat with, that are not from inside your household, and you don't have your mask on, then it doesn't matter if you wore the mask into the event, you still took it off and ate with them. And I just think that people don't understand that. So this is a great resource to have somebody who is so well versed and has been working in this field for so long and so well connected, because you have lived in Rockingham County, and you understand the culture, and you understand how our organizations work and our businesses. And so I just want people to know, like, that we have this access and we have this great resource, and for you to impart any other knowledge about businesses and the community, and how people could be doing things better and different.
Yeah, well, and one of the things that, I was thinking about a couple things when you were talking, but one of the things that I think is hard to understand is like, what is exposure and what is risk, right? So to the best that we know, an exposure is any interaction between somebody who is susceptible, which is anybody who has never had coronavirus, and someone who is infected. And that person who's infected, one of the ways that this particular disease is sort of insidious is it's often people don't know that they have it. So if you have symptoms, obviously you're going to be, a good citizen and stay home and not spread the disease. If you don't know you have it, that's a whole different ballgame, right? So the safest thing for all of us to do is to act as if we have it, right? And pretend that I'm infectious. I can infect anybody at any time. And do what you would want other people to do for you as far as taking care of the community when you think you're infectious. So always wearing a mask, trying to stay separate from people to the extent that you can, washing your hands, that kind of stuff. And that's why the state has been promoting, the 3 Ws. Is those are the best things that we have to help reduce the spread of the virus and keep people safe. So that's sort of like thinking about always infectious, because you never know when you might be, right, is one thing that's kind of hard to wrap your head around, because we're used to like, okay, if I'm sick, I'm going to have symptoms, right? I'm going to have a cough or a sore throat or a fever or something that lets me know I'm sick. With this disease, you don't always know when you're sick or when you're infectious. So pretending that you're always infectious is sort of a good rule of thumb to start with. The other thing that's kind of hard to wrap your head around is how big is my bubble, right? So if I'm being pretty careful, right, and I'm doing those 3 Ws pretty well, I'm not interacting with people, on a regular basis, maskless or up close and personal, what is my risk, right? So if I decided to get together with my family for Thanksgiving and maybe invite some of my close friends over, because I really was craving that and I haven't seen people and I really want to have Thanksgiving, how much more of a risk is that? So it's hard to think about, because we just don't know how big other people's circles are. But if you imagine, so you invited your best friend over and your best friend came over and they had their 3 children with them. So you've now been exposed to 4 more people, but you also are exposed to all of the people that they have been in contact with for the previous 14 days, right? So that might be coworkers. If the children were at school, it would be their schoolmates. If they played with somebody outside, in their neighborhood, it would be those children or those families. If they had someone over, to do some work on their house and there was a construction worker in the house, that's an exposure, right? So there's all these sort of external factors that kind of come into each individual person's risk that then become your risk if you decide to come in contact with those people. So even though we think we're doing a good job and kind of keeping our bubble small, it might not necessarily be so, because we just don't know what other people's exposures have been, which goes back to that original thing that I was saying, was like, just always assume that you're infectious and that everyone else is too. And, that's hard to do, because as people, we want to be in close contact with our friends and loved ones, and we just can't safely do that right now, unfortunately.
And I think that you just did a really great job of explaining it. It's like I want to put up a whiteboard and draw a circle and say, like, this is
Draw
your
bubbles.
bubble, and then here's your person, and then here's your, and like you would see really quickly though that if you mapped it out like that, that the bubble would suddenly be a whole lot bigger. And we went through that this year. My brother, he, I think I told you that they had their first child late October, and he understood that from the beginning, that it was about your circle, and your circle, every person you added to it, you added their entire circle too. And so that was kind of the conversations that we tried to have with people as we were trying to successfully get my sister-in-law through this pregnancy and making sure that she was safe. So we basically did not see them all summer. We had 1 or 2 outside events where everybody wore a mask and we didn't come in contact with each other. Drive-by, baby shower kind of type deals. And even that, was still risky to a point, depending on, if people had gotten too close to each other and that sort of thing. So, you just kind of do the best that you can do. But I think you're absolutely right. I don't think that people understand that the mask is to protect others. And the reason they say that is because, like you said, it's through respiratory droplets. And so they just don't understand that doing it and presuming that you were infectious and presuming that other people are infectious, that I just don't think it's been explained very well a lot of times, like on the media and in the news, because they don't understand and they don't have the knowledge, and it's not like they're interviewing somebody who does. And it's been this whole, well, the government's telling me what to do. And I try to remind people, well, the government told you what to do, and they made you start wearing seatbelts. And that was and when they started putting your kids in car seats, and those were all public health initiatives. Those were all the health of the public that the government was funding to make our people safe, because times change, things happen. Cigarette labels, alcohol labels, like whatever it is, those are all public health things. And I'm sure people, I don't know because I didn't live through it. I'm an 80s baby when I came along. I mean, all I remember are seat belts. I don't really remember car seats, but I remember seat belts. And then as I had my own children, car seats are still a big, there's a thread last night on my Facebook, and we talked about car seats and 5-point harnesses and, all that stuff. So it's a really important thing that I think has just been made so political. And you and I discussed that a lot. I mean, the news and the media and just in general, it was a really crazy, a really electrically charged politician versus the public year anyways. And then you add the pandemic on top of it, and it just made it crazy. So, I mean, what are some takeaways? Like, if you could just get somebody to hear you on a couple of points, whether it was community member or whether it was a business, and we definitely want to tell people, if you're a chamber member, how to contact you. But what are some just takeaways, like, from the discussion? Like, for people to I tell people when I want them to focus, I'm like, just clear your mind of everything that you know and hear what I'm trying to say about this. Like, what would be your takeaways?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple things to think about. I think the bottom line, most important thing is that we're all in this together, right? Like, nobody's enjoying this, right? So like, yeah, no, nobody wants to do any of these things, but that's not really the point, right? The point is we're in community together, right? Whether it means we're in community in a literal faith community, or in our Reidsville chamber community, or the community of Rockingham County, however you want to define community, we're in community together, right? And with that comes some responsibility to take care of one another. And that's something that we've kind of gotten away from in recent years in sort of the way that our, like you were talking about, politics have kind of divided us. We're still one community, right? We're still one group of folks who live together, work together, play together, we live together. We're a community. And part of our job, part of our responsibility of being a good citizen in that community is to care for the other people in that community. And the best way for us to do that right now is to think about the fact that we might accidentally be getting someone else sick. Someone else might be accidentally getting us sick, not on purpose, right? And what are the things that I can do to be a good, responsible citizen and to care for the other people that I live in this community with, or that I work with, or go to school with, or whatever? And the answer is really simple, right? It's really simple. And I know that there's politicalization about wearing a mask, and that people feel like they're being controlled, but it actually works, right? There's really strong scientific evidence that says if everyone wears a mask, disease rates go way down. And if you look to other countries where the control of the virus is much, much better than it is in the United States, it's because of that sense of community and caring for one another, and people being responsible about mask wearing and social distancing. So like, if we could do those things, like, just have in mind, I'm doing this to be good to other people. I'm doing this to take care of my community. I'm going to wear a mask. I'm going to think about my actions and my behaviors, and do the thing that I think is the most responsible thing to do towards other people. I think we'd be in a completely different place right now. And that's the hardest thing for me as a public health person, is to look at what's happening and to say, oh my goodness, it did not have to be like this, right? We could have hundreds of thousands of people who didn't get sick. We could have hundreds of thousands of people who didn't die, and didn't have to suffer, right? And that hurts my heart as someone who believes really strongly in prevention. Like, we could have prevented this if we had all gotten on that same page from day one, and been good, responsible citizens, and been really good about doing those simple public health measures that are not that hard, and they're really not expensive. It's very simple and straightforward. So, I mean, that would be my number one message, is to think about your responsibility as a citizen and how to care for the others around you. In terms of businesses, I feel really bad for businesses right now because, I mean, times are hard, right? There are a lot of people who have lost jobs and don't have income to spend at our local businesses. A lot of our businesses are struggling because, you know, people aren't able to use their services or shop in their stores or whatever because of job losses or restrictions on how many people can be in there or whatever reasons. And so, you know, I know that the community as a whole is really struggling because of the pandemic. And it only makes it worse when businesses are trying to be responsible and do the right thing and have their signs up at the door that say, you know, please wear a mask before you enter. And then people don't do that, right? That really is not fair to that business to put them in the position of having to try to police the behavior of their customers when people could just be responsible and put on their mask and go on about their business and do their shopping or whatever. And it's not that much of an inconvenience to do that. And it's easier for business owners if they don't have to try to be the police or the responsibility, you know, folks for their customers and their clients. So, you know, I think that's another way that we can care for our community is to take care of our business owners by showing them that we respect them, that we respect the rules that they've put up to try to keep all of us safe, and by doing the things that they've asked us to do, whether it's, you know, to wait a turn before we come in because they're at capacity, to wear masks, to use their hand sanitizer, to take our temperature, whatever it is that they have put in place as good public health measures. We should all be good, responsible citizens and customers and do that because we want to support them. We want them to stay in business. It helps our whole community be healthier when our businesses are thriving as well.
And that would be my key takeaway. Thank you for describing that so well. I think I really struggle, especially with social media. I have seen post after post about how I'm not going in such and such business until they don't make me wear a mask. And it's really sad because at the end of the day, they're trying to follow the mandate that's been put on them and that's been encouraged by so many different offices of government or people that they, you know, have to, you know, feel like they have to keep good working relationships with or whatever it might be, but also to protect their families. You know, we have shop owners who have families that are susceptible to things and that are in higher risk categories. You know, and at the end of the day, like if we want here in Rockingham County, if here in Reidsville, we want our boutiques and our retail and our restaurants, and we want them to survive and we want them to still be here, then you should be respectful of them and support them the way they've supported you and your kids and things all this time. And that's just how I feel about it. And I think that is a personal opinion, but it's a real struggle for me to see people down the businesses. And we've seen certain restaurants who have said, you know, we're not doing so well. And part of it was because they may not have been following protocols and people saw that their staff or their cooks weren't wearing masks and people stopped going in there, or that they weren't making the patrons wear a mask and they didn't feel comfortable and people quit going. And it's a bad situation heading into the winter. And so I just hope that people learn from this quickly before it's too late for some of our businesses. So I think that's a great way to sum it up.
Well, and I know we're close on time here, but I think that's the last point that I would make is like, now, if we're not going to do it now, things are going to get so much worse before they get better, right? So, I mean, I'm sure everyone has seen the uptick in cases over the last couple of weeks. It's going to go up. It's going to go up, and it's going to be worse until probably February or March, unless we all take responsibility now, right? So the sooner that we all just kind of go, okay, I'm in, and do the things that we're supposed to do, the better it's going to get faster for everyone. So, you know, that we're at sort of a critical time in terms of where the pandemic is in our community in the United States, as well as just locally right here in Rockingham County. And, you know, acting sooner rather than later is going to mean better outcomes for everyone. It's going to be better for health. It's going to be better for the economy. It's going to be better for everything. So that would be my number one thing. Do it now. Don't wait. Go ahead and get that mask and put it on.
I think that the timing, as you said, everybody thought, oh, that's going to happen in New York and it's not happening here. But like, as you said, we know that a pandemic, it was coming. And I think the amount of time that it took to really start showing and the fact that we're in November and it's coming to that critical mass point now when they were predicting it so long ago, but they don't understand that we were, as a majority, doing the things that we needed to do to flatten the curve and to keep our hospitals from being at max capacity. And it took all this time to get there. Now people are oblivious and they think that it's not real. They still can't see the reality. And so I think all those things that you said are so important, because it just took a lot longer because we stretched it out. And then we started seeing spikes because people were like, oh, we made it through. It's not a big deal. And unfortunately, that's just not how it works. So So tell us how businesses can get in contact with you so that they can talk through good practices and make sure that they're doing things the proper way.
The best thing they can do is shoot me an email, that jkimbrough@caswellmed.org, which is one of the Compassion Healthcare email addresses. And I'll be glad to set up a time to talk and learn about your situation and try to sort out how we can help you be as safe as you can be.
Awesome. Jen, thank you so much for being on the show. It is always so much fun to talk to you. I don't get to talk to a lot of people who understand those things. So it has been awesome to have you on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, just a delight. Thank you.
All right, folks, that is it for this Reidsville Chamber News and View show. As always, you can find us at 140 South Scale Street, right in the heart of downtown Reidsville. 336-349-8481, and look for us on Facebook at the Reidsville Chamber and the Reidsville Visitor Center pages. And we'll see you soon.